Hazmat. There we go. All right.
Will Joseph also talk about the Shakespeare Festival?
No, if we ask him. So someone puts a question in.
I'll put a question in.
And I was going to use Hamlet as my mic check today and didn't. I feel bad.
It always goes quiet when we're supposed to be talking, and I
know. It's
all
you know,
on
there's
the digital
always
front, which
yeah, exactly.
is a good name for a cyber movie.
We all learned our training early, and it's hard to kick those habits after you've been trained to do one thing.
Do it a couple hundred times. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're on YouTube and you see a link down below, that is to Zoom, where you can actually join the conversation. If you're a Zoom member here and you're an attendee and you're looking at this fine collection of panelists, and you may be wondering, how do I become part of that? How do I become part of that conversation? I have things to add. I have things to contribute. You can. The doors open at 6. You can come in. One of the things to know between 6 and 6:30 is if you ever want to test your rig. So you're saying, well, I don't know if it's good enough, or I don't know if it's going to be ready for this. I know a lot of people get nervous about that. 6 to 6:30 Pacific Standard Time is a great time to come in and test. We're just hanging out, having tea, having coffee. And if you want to come in and see how your mics look or sound, it's a good time to do that. So anyway, come in then, test it if you'd like. And we'd love to have you there. 6:40 to 6:43 is when we start the mic checks. Once we do the mic checks, the doors are closed. This will be the panel for the day. And then at 7 o'clock, we start opening to general questions. Now, this show, more than any other show, survives on your questions. You have to ask questions. Or it's a real short show where we talk about other things for a long time. So the best thing to do is to think about all those questions, all the things that you're trying to figure out, and write them down somewhere, and then bring them in the morning and throw them in here and vote on them. If you're not asking questions, vote on those questions. Prioritize our run of show. And so you can do that in Makana, which you can see there. So ask those questions. We go from 7 to 8 as general questions, and then the second hour, 8 to 9, is more specific. And in that, we'll talk about something very specific. Today, we're talking about multi-language streaming. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how to build remote rigs that you send out to folks. Saturday, we're going to talk about education. We do every Saturday. And then Mondays are generally wild card. Tuesdays are audio. Wednesdays are video. Those are that's kind of the pattern that we have there. If you want to share this with other people, do not share the link that you registered to, or people will come in as you. Everyone will come in as you. So use the link that I just posted into Makana there, and we will. That'll be the best way to share it out with folks and have them join. All right, Bill, do we have a couple questions we can start with?
We do. The first one comes from panelist Tony Mobley out of Newman, Georgia. Can the panel mention again some of the titles of Dolby Atmos content?
Titles with Dolby Atmos content, I guess is that the question? I mean, the best thing, pretty much almost everything new from Netflix, almost every new piece from Netflix is going to have Atmos content available to it. Most major films at this point are doing Atmos. So, but you can often find it in things like all the Marvels, most of the Star Wars, major films all have it, and more independent films are starting to add it. It was just to do Atmos, as Mickey can underline. There's some gear that's been required at a cinematic level, so it was something that not every movie did. But I think that is going to keep on getting wider and wider. But you can see it easily if you're on an Apple TV, because it'll say Atmos and Vision, nice big logos that tell you that they're there. And again, most of the major releases will all have it. And I think it's crazy for people, especially if what we saw in the summit, the Atmos first production process kind of gives you all the other mixes for free or semi-free. And it's funny, there's this push back and forth if you watch those interviews of sound engineers talking about the fact that hesitantly saying the stereo mix from the Atmos might be better than what they're doing by hand. That's a sacrilegious thing. Don't say that to people if you don't know who they are, because they're but the kind of the handcrafting of that doesn't seem like it's stacking up. And again, it's something people say carefully, but when you do the Atmos first, it just knows where all those things are and it intelligently puts them back into stereo. I don't know if Mickey wants to add anything to that or not.
Yeah, I think I mentioned a couple of days ago that like I really enjoy the Atmos mixes for the animation movies, like the stuff from Pixar, from
Yeah.
Disney, because I mean they're I think I'm assuming here, but they're building a totally new world from scratch. They don't have to anchor things in reality, so they're able to play a bit more in terms of the movement in the room. And also I'm a big fan of the mixes, yeah, from the comic book franchises, because it's just, you know, action packed and they're flying things all over the place.
Right.
And also one of the earlier Atmos mixes, which is Fury Road.
Mhm.
That is like a very, very active mix. So just for ear candy, you know, Mad Max is an extremely loud film, but yeah, they're playing around with Atmos on that film.
And it's not just new films. If they still had a lot of the information, a lot of times people have gone back and done stuff. So for instance, Unforgiven has a pretty good mix. It's not incredible, but they moved things around or added extra effects that I was kind of surprised that I think I was mentioning recently that I was watching a piece of it, and I was kind of surprised at how much they were using my side speakers, more than I expected. Jason?
Well, and, you know, again, +1 to what Mickey said about, you know, Pixar movies, for example, because they already have perfect 3D positional audio. Those movies, those scenes, it's not like they're rendered camera. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're basically rendered with the positional audio. I don't
know if it is. I don't know if I don't know. I actually don't know for sure. The way that those processes work in post, and I don't know if they definitely have the positional data if they wanted it, but I don't think that they're rendering the audio with that positional data. But if they wanted to get the positional data, they could. But I think that generally those processes oftentimes, at least in filmmaking, happen in two very different worlds that oftentimes are a long distance away, and it's not a bad idea to think about that. And when you get into real-time rendering, that's a really interesting process. One of the things that we've done in the past is work with where we put trackers in folks, and we could keep them in for 360, keep their motion, their position as it relates to the camera, something that we could keep track of, and you could do a lot of fun stuff with it. Go ahead, Alex.
I haven't heard this, but at the summit they showed a picture of, and also there is a Blu-ray 4K edition of Lawrence of Arabia from 60 years ago that has a Dolby Atmos mix. So if they have the audio stems, they can go back and do it. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Victor Cajallo from here in the panel from Booking South Dakota has the next 4 voted up question. I have a 2,500 square foot home, including an upper floor and lower. If you were buying a Ubiquiti system for my work today, what pieces would you recommend? I already own a 24 port hub. Excuse me.
Good, Stuart.
More hubs, one for each room, and then run cables from your main hub to those. That way you're not saturating the place with Wi-Fi.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that Ubiquiti is kind of low-level enterprise, so it's not designed to be super easy. It's easy. As enterprise goes, it's insanely easy, but as consumer goes, it's on the hard side. I would say start with a Dream Machine, and you can actually take your floor plan and lay it out on the Ubiquiti website, and they will pretty much calculate your coverage.
I have the consumer version of Ubiquiti, which is Amplify in the house. I bought it as an experiment, and it's okay. I think that the ease of use is very high. I mean, it automatically updates. It does all the stuff that it needs to do. It's pretty smart. I will say that the mesh network hasn't been very successful for me. In general, my experience with mesh at my house has leaned me towards I won't do that again. So as I upgrade it again, I will do something else, probably with lots of Wi-Fi access points, just because the nature of mesh makes real time really unstable. So FaceTime and Zoom and all these other things are not very stable, and even streaming. So if you have a very sensitive streaming ingest point like Twitter, it just drops out and it won't work. So you have to kind of think about that as well. Mickey? and then Victor.
Yeah, in terms of your Wi-Fi infrastructure, that would vary greatly on the how your home is constructed. You know what materials were used, like wood walls and wood paneling would generally be a little harder to push to break through than say what do you call this, gypsum board? What do you guys call
Sheetrock.
gypsum board? Sheetrock, yeah.
Drywall.
Drywall
too.
So yeah, it would vary greatly on the how the space is constructed. In terms of your switching and router, if you're just using like very basic protocols in your network, yeah, I would go with say the Dream Machine Pro, and then one of their switches depending on how many ports you need. But if say you're planning to run Dante in your system, which I think you're thinking of, maybe I would consider going through the Edge router line instead of the Unify line, just because you have more control of your network protocols there.
Go ahead, Victor, and then Jason.
Yeah, well, what I had planned to do was the rooms upstairs all have RJ45, so I was planning to buy the wireless access point and just, tap off of those into so they're basically wired, into the hub downstairs or the gateway. So I don't think I would have the Wi-Fi problems because am I correct about that? And second, do I need that cloud key thing?
Get the cloud key.
Go ahead, Jason, and explain.
The cloud key essentially allows this whole big, otherwise heavy Java virtual implementation that runs the entire network, secures your connectivity if you want to be able to connect outside of your house or your intranet. It just makes the whole thing seamless. Also, if you want to do cameras without, streaming up to the cloud, it comes with a terabyte hard drive, and it's dirt cheap. So I'd say get it, even if you're not going to use cameras. But yeah, it's just kind of it's the brains of the operation. And as far as streaming is concerned and mesh, Eero does a really good job.
All right, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just keep in mind, like if you do go with the Dream Machine, you don't need a cloud key because the cloud key is built into the Dream Machine, both the Dream Machine and the Dream Machine Pro. And in terms of access points, like I would suggest like going with the UAP AC Lite. With the size of your place, 2,500 square feet. What's that in square meters? 230 square meters. Maybe somewhere between 2 to 4 access points should cover that easily.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
We are in with Alton Christensen of Brooklyn, who says, since it seems a Blackmagic Designs micro settings, iris focus and color, so forth, control can't be done via the ATEM Camera Control. As an alternative, what's the best off-the-shelf LANC solution to control a Blackmagic micro cameras via OS 10?
Well, a couple things. One is I think you can control those. I don't know. It may be that you can't control them from your ATEM Mini, but if you have an SDI return back to that micro, you absolutely can control those things if the lens supports it. So if the lens that you have attached is supporting iris focus, iris and focus, you should and zoom, you should be able to do it through the lens or through the. We've definitely done that with the micros. As far as LANC solutions, you just have to decide what you're trying to control there. Typically, what we use the LANCs for are, if we have like a less expensive Manfrotto like camera controller for zoom and focus and that type of thing, you can get these little $200 or $300 little devices, or maybe $150 devices that let you control your camera through LANC. We don't really use LANC that much, but we use it there. A fun little fact is that there is, I believe it's called the S8. That is connected to the breakout of the micro has an S8 connector. That S8 connector you can put a receiver on for a remote control plane or helicopter, and you can run iris and zoom and focus. And we've definitely done that. So we had situations where we're putting that camera on a wireless system that is in our case, it was on a backhoe. So we were, but we needed to be able to, and we had some places where we put it really high up. In places, and we could actually use a remote control for a plane. There's a little bit of setup to do, but we were able then to iris down, focus, all those things from that remote control. So it's kind of a useful protocol as well. So there's a lot of different ways to talk to that camera. But if you have an SDI return, you should be able to do it. And again, the LANC, I don't know how to do LANC from an OS 10, but I do know that there are lots of little controllers that you would use. Go ahead, Stuart.
Could you say the name of that protocol again? Because I thought it was S-Bus.
It could be S-Bus.
It sounded like
it could be S.Bus. I think it was in S8. I haven't had to deal with it for a little while, so I probably merged it. So thanks for the correction. S-Bus.
Standardized.
S-Bus, LAN-C, whatever.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But yeah, no, S-Bus. Yeah. So S-Bus. Thank you for the S.Bus, I believe, is what it is, and it is there's a different protocol I was thinking about there. So thanks for the correction. But it's generalized for remote planes and all kinds of other cars, and you can use the controllers. It's pretty nifty. There you go. Yeah, exactly. All right. Next question.
When I used to see it first, there was a dash between LAN and C, but I think they dropped it, and I like LANC better, so I'm changing. That's it. Doug Ferguson is in next with, has anybody used the closed captioning service Falcon, and do you have any helpful tips for a newbie?
And I believe that's the EEG solution. Is that right, Doug?
Yes, the EEG. Yep.
And is that the auto captioning? I thought that was a different name.
I'm not certain. That's why I'm asking, because
Falcon's the auto captioning service of EEG.
For some reason, I thought that. Yeah. So I don't know if it is. I think that it's the cloud. I think it's the cloud solution. I don't think that. I think Falcon is the cloud connection. You still have ICAP captioners, and it is an RTMP. So what it does is it sends out. I mean, I haven't used it, but I think what happens is here's what this does is this solves your need for having an EEG. So Doug, we talked about testing it, and we probably should. I can call the guys at EEG, and we can probably set up a test for that. But what that is that replaces the EEG's hardware, so the 492. So what you can do is you're RTMPing into the cloud. The captioners are hearing the system and sending theirs into the cloud. And then it's streaming to Restream or YouTube or Facebook on its own. And so it's not an auto captioner, because I think that's called a Lexi or something like that. There's an auto caption.
No, the client is hiring a captioner. So they have that part of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know the other part of the puzzle. And then a follow-up question would be, can we position where the output goes on the screen? Because I'm building graphics, and I don't want the graphics to be covered up.
The captioner controls that. So when you're doing captions, the captioner in their system, so the insert of that is not, you don't control it on your end. If you use an EEG 482, and probably with a Falcon, you probably don't have control of that. Where that's generally controlled is on the captioner. So the captioner will decide the font. They'll decide whether it's all uppercase or lowercase, whether it's centered or left justified. We tend to lean towards less. What we do is we want it to be left justified, centered at the bottom and what we call two line. So two line left justified center is what, and all lowercase, or not lowercase, but mixed caps.
So if I gave them a template of the main stage and said, okay, here's where my graphics at the bottom are going to go, can you make it up here?
Usually what we do is we bring them in early and we have them set it up, and we just ask them to move it around. And what we would do is do a test. The thing is, every captioner is different, and they'll come into your show set up differently for somebody else. Like we get them where a lot of people are putting the captions across the top because they have all this junk on the bottom. So when I say junk, I mean like all the little happy faces and everything else that Facebook adds and stuff that we all wish we could turn off. And so so they put them there. Now, what a lot of people do also is they build their graphics knowing that the lower thirds or knowing that the captions are going to be there. So you'll see that more and more graphics are happening kind of up to one side and coming in where they come either above the social stuff or the subtle graphics that come over from typically from the left for most of ours, and they're kind of smaller and off there on the graphics. And I think Alex might be able to talk to the other Alex might be able to talk a little bit to that as far as positioning of those lower thirds to avoid social media and all the other things. Do you see that more often where it's kind of to the up and to the side?
Yeah, certainly the BBC are specifying that, so that people just get trained to look in a different direction. They get trained to say, okay, who is this? It's a different kind of level of information from what they're saying. So yeah, essentially it'll be there, or sometimes if the nature of the video is obviously if the person is starts off is looking in this direction, then you wouldn't have the caption there. And they design the caption so they'd work on the other side of the screen in the same place, so they'd be there, facing. That way. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Roughly, but they do have 3 positions. But the weirdly, the lower position is still quite high up. It's like on the bottom third, allowing for plenty of space along the bottom for both various kind of strips of information as well as text and other things that need to be put there.
Yeah, but that we're definitely we've seen a lot that evolve over the last 4 years. And just that more and more those graphics are moving up and out of the way because, especially with social media, you end up with all kinds of stuff. They've got all this stuff floating along and stuff you can't turn off. So, but you can have them define it. They have a grid, and you can try to define it with them exactly. But with most captioners, they're not technicians oftentimes, and so so you need to say, well, can you make it a little higher? Can you make it a little higher? But we book our captioners 1 hour before the event so that we have time to work on it. It's a little more expensive.
Yeah, we're doing a test today, and the show is Saturday, so hopefully I can sort it out, and I'll give some feedback to the group here. What
absolutely.
This new
but
venture
again, you test it with them, and hopefully it's the same captioner, and you get it just the way you want it and where you want it. But then, what I don't recommend, a lot of people have their captioners come in like 10 minutes before the event or 5 minutes before the event and start captioning, and you just end up with all kinds of chaos. We prefer to have people come in an hour before our show. And they get all set up 45 minutes before the show is when we want to send a caption test. We want them to hear audio and we want them to type. So 45 minutes before the show, I want to see that they can hear. The number one problem you have with iCap is they can't hear it. It's not usually on your end, it's on their end. They have something set up funky. And so you want to make sure that they can hear text. I mean, they can hear someone talking 45 minutes before the show. And when they type, it comes out. And it should be your nominal offset for captions should be about 4 seconds. So it should be 4 seconds behind. If it's outer range is 6 seconds, inner range is 2 seconds, 10 seconds is unacceptable. So you just kind of have to, think about that's what you're looking for as far as that offset. There's interesting things that Falcon may do that we do when we have separate feeds. When we're doing RTMP input into YouTube, we actually can add to buffer in our encoder, and we can time the captions so that they're less than a second off. You can't do that with embedded 608, 708, but you can with an RTMP input into YouTube. So just other things to think about. But let us know if you're doing tests today. Let us know what happened tomorrow, and if there's anything we need to DX, let us know. Thanks Doug. Yep. Next question.
Next question. Ken Joins is annoying me with this one from Seattle. Joy of Joys. Released today to the masses. Will anyone actually use this app? And I might be pronouncing that wrong. It might be.
I think it's I think that's the correct.
That's
word.
the down. Is if it's a question, it's
Yeah, exactly. Jeffrey.
Well, I've been on the beta program since a couple days into it, and I have yet to use it again. So, for me, it's just a sideload app, and it's a Mac only app unless they made a PC version. So I think I'm not. It doesn't excite me at all.
I'm not a big fan of keying people without good keyers, so it drives me absolutely crazy. So I can't say that I would use it or want anybody to use it. The first thing we do when we get into events is we're like, yeah, see that virtual background? Well, let's just turn that off. Let's just get rid of that. And so anything that keys someone in front of somebody else without a proper keyer, I want to immediately go away. So I do think that there's a place for a tool like that gave us easy access to images and video that we could play out. I think that a lot of the tools that we have are too much feature. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, but all these little extra little bits and pieces, I mean, I kind of get it that you could add some interactivity. I think I'll, always come back to that. what we've proven here, I think, is that the most important thing is authentic communication and learning, and people getting connected to each other and connected to the subject. And it really isn't about all the little tchotchkes, in my opinion. And I think if we focus on those basic core principles, you end up with a better product than if you start adding a bunch of stuff that oftentimes ends up to be a distraction. Anyway, next question.
And Ken, I was not annoyed. I was goofing with you. Brian Anderson of Silver Springs, Maryland, and here in the panel says, I was about to download DaVinci 17 yesterday and noticed that you can download the studio or the basic version. Does anyone know how the studio version is limited before purchasing? Watermarks? Random noise?
I think you mean that how the basic version is limited, and it is, yeah, go ahead, Stuart, and then Jason.
It's a lot of GPU accelerated stuff that simply doesn't work, or it puts a label over your video while you're working saying you need to get the full version for this effect to work.
Jason?
It's been a while because I've had the studio version for several months now. If memory serves, they limit your output. They limit your resolution output, and collaborative, they just announced they added. And there's one other change. Long story short, it doesn't really matter with the beta. You could use either.
Yeah. Mickey?
I haven't seen a limit on resolution output.
I do believe there is. I think you can't do 4K. I think you can do 1080p, but I don't think you can do 4K output from the basic version. Mickey?
Yeah, you can't do 4K and above in the standard version of Resolve.
Felipe, wait, Felipe, are you still here? Or did we lose him? He said you can do 4K, but not above 4K.
Yeah, that's the same thing as I was thinking.
Yeah, I think it changed on DaVinci 16, and they started allowing 4K for the basic version.
Yeah. They've been pretty good at it. Like the basic version is extremely capable. Like most people can do everything that they'd want to do. I would start in the basic. I wouldn't go to the studio until you hit something that you couldn't do. Like when it pops up and says you can't do that, that's when I would move to that. You can learn it, you can be jump into it, and there are some limits to it, but the basic version, there's nothing like watermarking or anything else for your outputs. I mean, other than the GP, some of the other stuff like that. There's some collaborative, some rendering issues, some resolution limits. They've been pretty smart. They limit it to where people like me have to go buy it, but for the day, I had it for years where I was just using the basic because I was like, I'm not really using this, I'm not going to buy it, and of course it still hurts me that I think I bought 16 cameras that came with it, and I don't know where those licenses are. Anyway, Brian.
Yeah, specifically, I'm interested in the features in Studio, like playing with Atmos. That's not in the basic. So if I get the Studio version in beta, I'm assuming it functions, but in a limited way.
No, the Studio in beta will just function. Like it'll just work. Like they're not going to limit anything. They want you to just use it and play with it and bang on it. They're not going to be. It's when they switch over to the full version that you'll need to.
Right, and you can get the Studio of 16 as well. So I was going, okay, does it run for a month and then revert back to basic, or?
I don't know when it. I just think you can't upgrade to the final version.
No, they've never had those sorts of timeout limits. The one thing that is missing is noise elimination for your camera.
Right. Mickey?
Yeah, I just want to clarify with the resolution thing. With the basic version, you can do UHD, but not true 4K, like not 4096 by whatever.
Right. No, that's good. But it's I think that their model has been pretty amazing, as far as giving you something that is very capable, and you want to have it, and the fact that they ship it with all their cameras, it's kind of back to the photo. If you remember, Photoshop used to come with every scanner. For us, old enough to remember that used to ship. You get a full copy of Photoshop, and every scanner you get your Photoshop discs. And in the same way, and especially when you look at the sheer number of cameras being shipped by Blackmagic, that's a whole bunch of people with a free version of an app that is very competitive to everything else. Sometimes more, you could argue, more competitive. I really think that the race, if you're on a Mac, I'm making decisions about whether I want to use Motion in Final Cut or Resolve. I'm not making decisions about whether I want to use Premiere or Avid. I think those you use because you already use them. But if you were a new person on a Mac, at least I would, and if you're a PC person, I would just use Resolve. You know, like I don't think that there's, again, it's moving very fast, and it's a much more technical beast than Premiere, in my opinion. And so it's you know, it has a lot more scale to it, especially now with Atmos support. So I think that they're putting a lot of pressure because, you know, you can have something for $300 that comes now with a piece of hardware if you order it. I mean, that's just ruthless. You know, I'm going to give you a nice shiny piece of hardware with your purchase. So it's basically coming to you almost in some ways for free. You know, I think that it's really, to me as a Mac user, and it's not one or the other. I'm not making a choice between Final Cut and Resolve. I think that there are things I want to do in Final Cut and Motion and things I want to do in Resolve. And I don't think that I don't see them as a exclusive thing. I think that both of them belong on my computer. Brian and then Stuart.
And do you know, is the studio version licensed to a single machine, or could I potentially install it on a couple? Two. Perfect.
You get 2 per license. Stuart?
I would normally ask this question to Guy and Jason, but I think Jason would be I don't see Guy tonight looking at the grid view. Do we have a date when the Resolve that comes with the lovely, shiny Jog Shuttle controller will be in stores?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see if we can figure that out. I don't think we know. The other thing though is that note that I can't get into too much detail, but note that the version on the Mac App Store is not the same as the version that you buy, and you should not buy the one on the Mac App Store. Do not buy the one on the Mac App Store. It's the same price and less of an app. So don't go down that path. And I think it has to do with some of the sandboxing and everything else, but you can't don't do that. So, you know, and you can buy it online. You don't have to buy the hardware, although you won't get the fancy jog and shuttle. So you can buy it from Tool Farm. We'll actually activate it for you online. They'll send you a code, you know, within 24 hours that you can do. So if you need it quickly, that's what I've done, is buy them from Tool Farm. I think they're the only retailers that I know of that do that. But at this point, now everyone's going to want to go back to retailers because they can get a piece of hardware. And I don't know how much I'm going to use the hardware, but I'm sure not going to buy another copy of Resolve without it. You know, like, you know, that I think that's, I mean, why would you do that? So you can get more for less or the same. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, they did mention though that the package that comes with the controller is just for a limited time. It's not going to be forever.
Well then,
so pre-order it. It is up on B&H, so pre-order it now, and that way at least you'll get it.
Yeah. Next question.
Well, the next question is really 3 questions, because Sky, who left us right at the start of the show, was very excited that Photo Joseph's on the panel today, so he has not 1, but 3 questions for Joseph in a row.
All right.
The first one, what photo style is your specialty, and what style have you had to work hardest to learn?
Specialty, gosh, I specialize in not specializing.
There you go.
That's good.
I'm one of those. Yeah, I started my career kind of into everything and not picking anything. And it's one of those where I look back and I say, well, if I had chosen one specific style, I'd probably be more financially successful, but I'd be really, really bored. So yeah, I just I chose to do everything, and my favorite jobs are jobs that I've never done before, which makes them harder to get because I can't prove that I can do them, but I want a challenge every time I do something new. So that's
the second part is, did you
that's
start
a
as
pretty. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, finish your answer.
I was gonna say that's a pretty good non-answer.
The second thing he asked is, did you start as a photographer, then move to an educator? Why?
So I started in photography when I was teeny tiny. I got into photography when I was a little kid because of my dad. So I would say that I started with photography, and I just got into education through the jobs that I worked, and ended up doing a lot through education as a result of that. So for example, when I worked at my first job out of college was a company called, well, many of you will know because we're all gentlemen of a certain age, MetaTools. Previously to that, MetaCreations, prior to that, MetaTools, part of that HSC software, creator for Kai's Power Tools. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads there. I was doing education for them, and that got me into the education shtick. And so I've always done both photography and education, and then of course eventually moved into video as well.
So his final question is, Blackmagic Pocket 6K, 4K, or Lumix? Which one, when, and why?
Well, I'm a Lumix ambassador, so that's an easy question for me to answer. That's obviously going to be the Lumix cameras. I prefer the quality of them overall. I know a lot of people love the Blackmagic. I like the look of the Lumix. I'm not just saying that as an ambassador, but to be totally fair, I've never shot extensively with the Blackmagic cameras.
Yeah. Okay,
Thanks.
ready to move on?
Yep. Next question.
Jonas Datal of Reutlingen says, recommendations for a desk mic setup used for Zoom and streaming through my amp. Is that like a guitar amp?
I'm not sure what that...
ATEM Mini Pro?
Oh, maybe. Hard to parse that.
I'm going to guess that that's ATEM Mini Pro. It's a new acronym for us.
There you go.
So,
I was messed up by Peter
setup.
Moore's guitars in the back. That's why I was thinking amp.
I mean, when you say Zoom, if you're using it for something, I still am a big fan in general, as you can see, of a headset mic. Using, and the reason is just that as I move around, as I look at things, it's not in the frame, and B, it's, but a low profile headset mic I think goes a long way. I will say that the off axis rejection of something like what Jason's using, the PR40, is going to be much better. You're going to get better bass response. It sounds better, fundamentally. When I do training, I used to use the PR40, but I found it was very hard for me to remain in the same proximity and and really have it be exactly what I wanted. The problem was when I went away from the PR40, people said, "What happened to the mic?" Your mic went. So I've had to standardize on something else. But I think that I prefer something where I can move around and I can look at things. And I have a lot of things on my desk, so me moving a lot is something that's important. So I don't like things on it or even hanging over it because I just have so many other things I'm already dealing with. So I've really leaned towards that for general usage. For pure quality, a PR40, I think, but. Jump around here. Jeffrey and then Mickey and and Joseph and Jason.
So when it comes to the ATEM Mini Pro in those 3.5-inch jacks, it's probably best to have something in between. I once again I recommend the IK multimedia line because you can plug it into the computer and also you can take a line straight to your ATEM Mini Pro. As for something that would be on your desk, we can stick with the Pile because Pile does make what's called a podium microphone, which you've probably seen in a lot of movies. And it's just it sits on the desk and it's used for podiums, and it works pretty well. I have one around here somewhere, but I don't know where it is. So that would be the best recommendation is to get it into some sort of small mixer into the ATEM Mini Pro. I think you'll have a better results.
And then you just have to decide from a price perspective whether you care about the preamps or not. So you can get really inexpensive $50 little mixers that will do what they need to do, little Behringer analogs or whatever. But of course, what we use as our standard for remote kits, which we'll talk about next week, or tomorrow, is we use the MixPre 3s with because it's, and we primarily use them partially because of noise assist, but also because they're the least expensive to use those preamps, which we think are pretty much the best in the business. Mickey and then Jason.
Well, Jonas didn't mention a budget, so I would say I know I'm a new 87 going into an LA610.
Well, the only thing I'll say about the Neumann is what's it like? Because I have a small Neumann. I think it's the 102, and the problem is I can't use it in my general environment because it picks up the whole room. Like it picks up small flies by the window, it'll pick it up. So I have a problem with my Neumann is that it's super sensitive. You have to really have a treated room and everything else to make it work.
Mickey, you're cheaping out. You don't want the M149?
Is the U80 is the 87 like that as well? The U87 is it pretty much everything.
I have the 149 and that will pick up everything. But serious answer though, PR40 and then MixPre 6.
Right. Yep. Jason, and then Photo Joseph and then Stuart.
It's worth mentioning that the PR40 requires an insane amount of gain. So does anyone even know if the ATEM Mini can actually drive that? And to give you an idea, the off-axis, watch this. See, I'm talking now and it's just completely gone.
Yeah. So you would need a preamp in between to make that work with the ATEM. Go ahead, Photo Joseph.
Yeah, I was going to go the opposite direction from Alex. I'm actually using a shotgun, a mini shotgun, and this is relatively affordable one. It's an Audio-Technica model is AT875R. It's under 300. And there's multiple reasons I chose this. One is the very narrow pickup pattern. So if I go off axis, it goes quieter pretty quickly. I don't want to be tethered. I like to be able to move around, but I also like being able to avoid any extraneous noise in the room. So this does a good job at that. The other thing is this one's XLR. This is XLR, which does require, again, some kind of preamp, but I would definitely recommend feeding it into your camera instead of going directly into the ATEM so that you don't have to worry about sync issues. And the second thing is with the XLR mic, this gets its power from the camera. So I don't have to worry about turning it on or off, forgetting to replace the batteries or anything like that. It's just always there. So those are some things to think about if you're going to do this a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart?
Regardless of whether your budget is an Alex, 3 Alexes, a Mickey, which is now above an Alex.
Yeah, the Mickey is
or a sub-Colin, make sure you spend some money on decent stands that don't sit on your desk. Trust me, I made that mistake. Your mic will resonate with the fan noise and hard drive noise. Put it separate to the desk you're working on.
I'm afraid that that Mickey now, a Mickey, is now $3,200 for the U87.
Yes.
So we have now set the price. So there's an Alex, which is $700, and then there's a Mickey, which is $3,200. So now if you just say it's just one Mickey, then we have it there. So we've now set our protocol there. All right.
So that's what, four and a half Alexes to the Mickey.
Yeah. We don't worry about little things like evenly divisible or anything silly like that. All right.
And
Next
it's even
question.
worse if it's in Australian dollars.
Next question.
Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan says some really nice things about office hours up at the top, but then gets to what brand of video cable do you recommend to connect an Apple 11 Max Pro to an ATEM Mini Pro? So some sort of US
Go ahead.
HDMI.
Just lightning to, I think it's just lightning to HDMI, or it's a lightning to HDMI converter, right, Jason?
Yep, that's exactly right. The Apple branded one is just fine. If you're using an iPad, the OWC works really well, and you can also use an Apple TV. Yeah, there it is. Yep, Jeffrey has it.
Yep. Go ahead and photo Joseph. Thinking about it, and one of the things
I got to get faster on the unmuting there. Yeah, I was going to point out that is the right adapter, but if you're feeding that into the ATEM, because it's a vertical orientation, you're going to want to set up some macros. So I was just going to show that I've got that macro set up. I clearly don't have it plugged in properly, but like this is to show a picture-in-picture of the iPhone cropped to that specific aspect ratio of the phone. So it's one of those things that if you're going to set it up and you're going to use it vertical, you can do a picture-in-picture with yourself next to it and just build a macro to call that up.
That's great. Tony?
I think it's quite funny that my 11 Pro Max camera went out as the question was being asked, but it was interesting. I guess this is one of the things that you have to consider when you're using the 11 Pro Max as a camera, that your phone may go to sleep while you're on office hours. And so that is exactly what has happened. So
well, you can set it to never. You can go into your phone and just say never go to sleep. Like you can, it's not recommended to leave it that way for security reasons, power reasons, all kinds of other things. But you can, go into your display and set it to just never go to sleep.
But what I wanted to share, Alex, was that Filmic Pro is a definite software solution if you're going to use that cabling that has already been mentioned. It is, you can make all kinds of adjustments with your iPhone as a camera. It is.
Can you
really
control more
up.
than I've only played with it on a point to point. Can you control more than one phone with the controlling app, or is it just you kind of pair? You can.
Yes.
I've got a growing pile of iPhones laying around, as I buy new ones, and I was thinking about trying to do like a multicam thing in the kitchen with a whole bunch of iPhones just for fun.
Yeah, it'll show up as each camera that you use. If you use Filmic Remote, you can control different iPhones with Filmic Remote, and it allows you to make all kinds of settings, and I'm still learning it. But it's really cool.
That's great. Mike, and then Bill, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, Tony, real quick, you just want to go into your phone settings in display, and then you can turn that off and put it to never go to sleep.
Yeah, it was smart of Apple to design those HDMI connectors because they also have a power in. So you attach a lightning power feed, and then your phone will not run out of battery while you're doing your video inserts. Good design.
So next question.
Moving on to James Babbitt of San Diego here. Hi, Alex. What pro audio and video gear might increase in price now due to the ATEM fire in Japan?
The ones listed right now are SSL, Tascam, Mini DSP, Emerging Technologies, SPL, RME, and it is pretty much everyone with a DA. I mean, they're the only ones that they're the only ones that make those. so it would probably be everybody could be affected by it. Now some of them have, they might have things like disaster insurance, which will pay for the delta so that they don't have to pay for it. Some of them will get ahead of that or have been ahead of that, but or should be anyway. But it is it's catastrophic. I mean, the AKM fire is, for those of you who haven't been following along, this is what happens. Small little chip that they make, the whole fab burned down. It's going to take at least 6 months to get it back up again, which means that one little chip will potentially hold up. And the chips that are out there now selling for as much as 50 times more than a $5 chip is now selling for $250. It's a big deal, and so it's a big mess. And this is where oftentimes things change. When the earthquake hit and Sony happened to have both SR deck machines in Japan, that was the end of tape. Like that's what killed tape, was the earthquake and the fact that every year Sony brings both machines into one place to calibrate. And that was the end of tape. Anyway, Jeffrey and then Mickey.
You mentioned Tascam, and that's kind of sad because they were just rebuilding after being rebought through the Gibson bankruptcy. So they're probably on the verge of bankruptcy themselves. So something like that could probably put them over. So supporting those companies that you love is very important as well.
Mickey?
Yeah, as Alex mentioned, pretty much any product that has an ADDA converter, probably 70-80% they're using chips from AKM. And that includes sound devices. So if you guys need to get your mix pre's, go get them now. But they did mention though that AKM has started to engage with other fabs to possibly take on some of the production load that's missing right now.
Because of the danger that they have, I mean, the danger that something like that happen, and why they would work with competitors to make that work is because, again, they could lose their entire business if people figure out a way around it because they can't, if it lasts too long, or if it's too much of a disruption, as we said before, you can end up with an entire new business model. Jason?
This is just one of these entirely vertical markets where, everybody's getting the same thing. I'm reminded of last year, I think it was like a SODIMM or an NVMe chip plant that completely destabilized RAM prices for an entire year.
Right. Yeah, we've seen it with hard drives, all kinds of floods that affect hard drives. So it's always an issue there. All right, now we're going to go into speed round. So we'll probably call on less people when we come to you. Be more succinct. Go ahead. Next question.
Tony Mobley, Newman, Georgia, and the panel. What is the best way to create custom commercials for YouTube? Not creating content, just want to advertise.
Can you be more specific, Tony? I said we're going to go to speed round, but I'm confused.
I'm asking the question actually for my brother. He has a business that he wants to advertise. I've tried to convince him to create content and then embed his commercials in his content, but he doesn't want to do that. He just wants to advertise his business on YouTube.
Go ahead, Stuart.
The model that Tony just mentioned of creating content and embedding the adverts, you might want to check YouTube's terms of service. I think that's a model that they actually actively stop. But a couple of examples of people who are very good at throwing in sponsor messages and what have you. Look at Linus Tech Tips free segues to his sponsor. They're absolutely brilliant. Advertising channels could learn things from him. Another good one is Destin from Smarter Every Day with his Audible book mentions, and I've often mentioned Cletus McFarland, who is a marketing wizard.
Yeah, Mickey?
If you can make a redneck look palatable for everybody, it works.
There you go, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm not depending on the scale of the business. If it's a business that can what do you call this, that can afford hiring an advertising agency, I would go with that because the agency would work on things such as strat and all that. But say if it's not at that scale yet, approach a production company that specializes in advertising, because to a certain extent they can also help out the marketing department of the company with strat
And all I'll say is that interruptions generally tell people to stop listening at this point. I mean, people don't. I wouldn't try to interrupt my own show. I wouldn't create my own content and then interrupt my own show with a commercial that I have. I would use the content. Content marketing is what we would call it. Is use content to draw people in and entertain them and have them learn more about it. And if you want to talk about something that your business does, just talk about it in the context of what you're doing. I think that's going to be by the way, we provide this service, but you're much better off doing that than creating an insert thing about your own thing inside of your own content. I wouldn't recommend that.
I apologize, Alex. He does not want to do any content at all. He just wants to advertise.
Yeah.
And I told him I didn't have a clue.
It's a hard road. Yeah, so. That's all I'm saying. There's a deep hole of money that he's going to pour into that and probably not get a lot out of the other end. Unless he's better off doing Google AdWords. I mean, it's much more efficient. Unless he has the video chops to pull it off. Next question.
Moving to Tony Mobley of Newman again. How many of the panelists are adjusting their lighting during office hours?
I get bored.
Yeah, very rarely. So I very rarely do it week to week unless I'm moving somewhere. Real quick, Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to say really quickly, unless you have open windows where the sun is changing over the course of time, but that's important. I've done that. I block my windows so I don't have to changing light field through the whole
I blocked
thing.
all my. It makes it easier when you get rid of as much natural light as possible. Next question.
Angela Iserman says, hey, masterminds, while doing a virtual camera on Zoom, I had some odd flashing OBS issues. It happened when I was pushed to a breakout program or room. It has to a fresh OBS. I had to do a fresh OBS restart once in the room. Is this a known issue, or do I have an odd setting that I need to change?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to guess that you had some sort of strange frame mismatch or timing mismatch between some sort of plugin and some sort of profile that just messed it up. But I have never heard of that.
Virtual cameras in general are kind of a cheat. So you just have to remember that you're kind of, tying, when you're using a virtual camera from OBS, it's kind of tying the thing together with baling wire. So you just, that's that's going to be the challenge. And you're changing states. So you're dropping the state and then reopening the state. When it kicks you, when you move from attendee to panelist, or when you move from a full room to a breakout room, you're basically in a very fast pace. You're turning something off and turning back on again. And given the less stable nature of the virtual camera process, it's not unusual that you might have something fall apart. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
Just the whole idea that, if you're using OBS, maybe you're also using a computer that's really not powered to do something like going from OBS to Zoom, and you're encompassing that all in one machine. So it might be an internal thing.
But I think it's a fast drop and a fast pickup is probably the thing it's just missing the handoff. Next question.
Matt Cooley in Montreal says, does anyone have a way to download a 720p version of a Facebook Live video? I have a client that needs to edit one, but the download feature in Facebook only allows for low-res downloads, even though the video is 720p, and it's on the client's own Facebook account.
Go ahead, Brian.
Check out Shutter Encoder. Shutter Encoder wraps a lot of open source software, command line usually software, into a GUI that is not the best GUI ever, but it'll probably do it. Facebook is one of the things it supports. And also, someone asked a question yesterday about batch processing audio files to -24 LUFS, and Shutter Encoder can do that too for free. So it's a Swiss Army knife that does a lot of really good stuff.
Great. Next question. We're going to be moving fast because we're running out of time.
Kyle Hammond out of Chicago. I had a Zoom webinar last night that I couldn't hear until I used loopback as a source. Anyone else have this issue?
Couldn't hear it until... Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, not sure what he couldn't hear, so I don't know how to answer that.
I guess you couldn't hear the webinar. My guess... Yeah, I think that the other thing you have to do with loopback is if it gets into your chain, you could be listening to nothing through it before that. Go ahead, Jason.
Also, if you have multiple Rogue Amoeba apps, the ACE, kind of the back end that taps and hooks the kernel, if you have a mismatch, they usually push all their updates at the same time. If you have a mismatch between one and the other, that'll totally do it.
Yep. Next question.
Photo Joseph has another question. How do you get the XLR into your camera? Should I use the XLR interface for my GH5 for that?
Yeah, if you have an interface like that, then yeah, that's the way to do it. Those can be pretty expensive if you don't already have one. There are less expensive ones on the market. They're not going to be as good, but I pulled up one from Ceramonic that's $125 XLR interface. It just has a mini jack out. So, or use a proper interface like the Mix Pre if you have something like that. That'll give you a better quality.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond of Chicago is back with, I just learned that Zoom can update past 5.0. He has a question mark after that on Chromebooks, and thus Spotlight doesn't work. Is this true, or is there a workaround?
Welcome to Chromebooks. How's it going over there? So sorry.
Not too good.
I get the power. I get the thing. Just Chromebooks is like, just gruel. I'm just sorry. Like, it's just, like Chromebooks are just and it's just like this as a creator, it's just pains my heart that my kids are
there
on
where
Chromebooks.
netbooks went to die. Like, that's all there is to it.
Anyway, so you're going to have all kinds of limitations. And I bought the Chromebooks when they first came out. I was pretty excited about them, but the number of limitations when it comes to AV and installs and software support and everything else, you can do the most basic things that, you can be like, and it's just, so I'm sure that it'll get upgraded, but it's probably, and probably soon, only because there's probably some kind of limitation that they have within the Chromebooks, but because so many schools are using stuff like that. And I guess the only question is whether Zoom doesn't look that as an option because everyone's using Meet if they're using Chromebooks. But they're really frustratingly limited. Next question.
Ruben Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan says, why does the live output view flash after I plug in a Surface laptop?
Go ahead, Jason.
Because Microsoft is not very good at making hardware. I'm not being sarcastic. That's absolutely true. Anytime you plug it in, there's this bizarre kind of ground shift that happens throughout the body, and that's just how they're made.
There you go. Next, go ahead, Stuart.
Just on what Jason just mentioned there, the Microsoft Surface is proof that not everybody can do what Apple's doing with the M1.
I'll argue that nobody else can do it. Like that's why Apple's playing to a strength, and that's why everybody in the, a lot of people should be worried, about what they saw there. Their Apple's first try coming out that way. Nobody else can do that. Like nobody else has the skill set to build that, what they've done, and they're fully leveraging what their core capacity is. It is terrifying in both good and bad ways. Of when I saw what they were doing, I was like, I think this is going to be a big deal. And then when you saw the Geekbench stuff come out, you're like, everyone is screwed. They're about to just pull away.
It's crazy that their lowest end laptop is now like 6 times faster than
it's,
anything else. That's insane.
It's not 6 times, but it is faster than the Mac Pro, the new Mac Pro. Jason.
the cynic in me just hopes, just for fun, they put like one tiny little like nod to like Geekbench in the silicon just to do that.
Right. Yeah. Next question.
Our last question in the general purpose round here from Mike Burns in Spokane and on the panel. Would love suggestions for mesh router systems. My Extreme Capsule is pretty old security-wise. Looking at the Gryphon MESH router, parents love this system because of parental controls. I have 4 teens doing at-home learning. My home is 4,400 square feet and lath and plaster walls. Help!
Mickey?
Yeah, I would typically suggest Ubiquiti's amplify line, but for parental controls, Eero.
Yeah. Jason?
Yep, Mickey's answers was perfect.
And the parental controls on Eero are pretty good.
Rock solid.
I do think that as a parent, that the thing that I'm still researching and I'm going to be working on over the next couple of weeks is actually possibly rebuilding my whole system specifically for parental controls, because it's just now the kids are on all the time.
Your kids are too smart. It's open DNS or nothing.
Well, and it's I mean, the internet is not something that preteens should, or even teens probably should be on all the time.
Adults probably shouldn't.
Yeah, most adults too. Go ahead, Photo Joseph.
Yeah, parental controls are great on Wi-Fi, but, and this is perhaps a topic for another day, anyone with an iPhone, you can just turn off their Wi-Fi, they get on their LTE, and then boom, all your controls are gone.
Yeah, I don't give my kids phones. So
that's
an easy one to solve.
Yeah, so I actually started a parental control channel on Facebook because there's a huge need for this. And there are services out there that will install a profile on your phone, which actually follows you when you get off Wi-Fi.
Right.
Do they work
Who's
on
gonna
iPhones?
Do the Neo-Luddite newsletter. We need one.
Yeah, absolutely.
They do work on iPhones, but
all right,
yeah,
we're shifting gears to our new hour, our focused hour. And we're going to be talking about multi-language streaming. And to define that just a little bit for everyone, multi-language streaming, what we're talking about is streaming out multiple languages, audio or possibly captions, but audio I think is mostly what we're going to talk about, into a variety of different outputs, whether that's a custom output or social networks, and how do we support all of that. And this one, Photo Joseph's here because he pinged me and said, "Hey, have you guys talked about this yet?" And I was like, "No, we haven't. We talked about it some. We've done our group got together and did a support process with His Holiness the Dalai Lama's team to figure that out. So we've been understand a little bit of it, but we haven't really talked about it in detail. So I thought it'd be a great subject. Joseph, do you want to talk about it at all? About what you're kind of wrestling with or working on?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for having me on to talk about this. So here's the basic situation. Locally, we have this group called The Hearth that is a storytelling organization. 4 times a year, they, before COVID, would get together and you'd have groups, audiences of up to 300, 400, 500 people, depending on the size of the venue. And people stand up and tell stories. Beautiful community event, really nice. COVID, we need to go online. Just before COVID started, they had started a second chain of this that was a Spanish language group. We have a large Spanish speaking community here. And so they were doing 2 of these. They got the English one and a Spanish one. And because of COVID, they want to bring everything online, ideally live, and that's what we're working towards. And they want to do a simultaneous English and Spanish event where they're switching back and forth between English and Spanish speakers. So to live stream it, what we want to do is have 3 language tracks. One that is the native language, so you can hear it in both as they go. One that's all English and one that's all Spanish. So of course that requires real-time, UN-style translators there to translate in real time the one language to the other. But then the question is, how do you stream that live? And I know YouTube doesn't support that, so there aren't that many systems that do. And I'd started down that path, and IBM's got something that'll do it. I think Ustream, and trying to figure out how this can be done. Budget obviously is a concern, but at this point I don't really want to think about budget because maybe we can raise whatever money we need to make it happen. But it's really technically, how do we go about doing that? And we can have a translator in-house who's in a sound booth there to do it, or I understand that you can even do this remotely and have the feed going to someone somewhere else in the world that they feed back through. Obviously, you're going to have a little bit more latency with that, but it's more about getting those channels, the multi-track audio, online so we don't have to stream 3 separate videos and confuse people by saying, if you want to see this in English, click this link, that they can just choose the audio track once they're in there. That's the ultimate goal. So that's what I wanted to talk about.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Hey, just had to get rid of perfect sync. Couldn't, except for when you've got more than two languages, wouldn't the easy way simply to be panning? Putting the English in the left ear, the Spanish in the right ear, and then putting the translation of the Spanish to English in the left ear, and vice versa.
It works for some people, but
it might work.
The issue is that if they're watching on a phone or other things, it'll sum those two together. So not everyone's listening to it in stereo. It's actually a problem when audio is out of phase. Is when it sums to when they sum together on a phone, you'll be listening to it on a headphone, and people are just hearing noise. Outside of that. So there is only one player that I know of that does this seamlessly, and that's the Apple's AV Foundation player, and now that is and we use it in conjunction with Akamai, where you can tag your languages as they go up. So you have and basically what you're doing is you're building a manifest that is going to tell the player this is what you're getting. Now there's probably a lot of ones that you can roll your own to do that, and I'll do a little research on that. I know some folks that work on that, but the only one we've done in the recent past, in the last couple of years, is using that as the multi-language delivery, and so you can set those languages, and the player will know what to do with those, and also with captions and language and everything else. So outside of that, we generally go back to what you were talking about, which is, hey, there's a button if you want to watch the English and the Spanish. You go to those. That's the easiest way, the least expensive way to do it, is to create a page on your website or on your app or whatever you're going to do that has three nice little buttons that tell you. Now, with only two languages, two languages is a different bubble. So a lot of the stuff that I've worked on are 6 languages and more. So when you get into that, you end up with a different pipeline. You have to be very, there's a whole bunch of things that you have to worry about there. With only 2 languages, what we've also done is done a mixed experience. So, and this is a tricky thing to do in your mixer. But what we do is you basically are ducking them back and forth. So when the Spanish speaker is speaking, you hear a soft English below it. When this English speaker is speaking, you hear a soft Spanish below it. And what we're doing is using a Dugan auto mix to push one down to the other to attenuate one or the other. And so basically you have one mix. When you only have 2 languages, you can get away with this. And we did this at a pretty high. What we did is we had an event with a Indian speaker and then a tech tech speaker, and the two of them, we had to send something back to India as a result for Indian TV. So we put it up on AsiaSat 5 and came down. And what we did was we gave them, you can have all Indian, you can have all Hindi, you can have all English, or you can have this mixed track. And most people took the mixed track because it just made it easier for someone. But it's a hard track to do. It's a technical mix. You really need a good audio engineer to put it together. And but you can use anything like a X32 or QL1 or something like that. But you do want a piece of hardware that knows what it's doing, or that you have controls over it. But basically, what you're doing is you're going to set that up, and it's largely automatic. It's not like someone's mixing this, but you're setting it up so that you get a soft English mix underneath the Hindi, and you get a soft Hindi underneath the English. And it's kind of a complex interrelationship between which one is kind of working there. And so you can do it by hand. It's just harder. So you can have someone sit there with a mixer and bring as the you have a second when someone's talking, and it depends on how much there's interaction. So people are telling stories, for instance. This is really easy. If people are having a conversation, it's harder. If they're having a free form conversation, this gets really hard to do by hand. You really want to do it as an automatic mix. But that process is nice for everyone, and you can make it an option. For some people, I think it drives them crazy because they don't like hearing 2 languages at one time. One of the things that a bunch of us have been talking about, since I do a lot of surround sound stuff, is we've been threatening to put a translation behind you, like over your shoulder, so that you can listen to it in the center speaker in the front, and then hear it from somewhere behind. That won't be that's not generally applicable to your audience, but it could be an interesting way to think about it. Go ahead, Jason, and then Bill.
That Dugan approach, it took me a second, and then I realized, wait a minute, that is exactly the NPR approach, where they start with the foreign and then it goes to translation, kind of for verisimilitude and the fact that NPR doesn't usually cater to a multilingual audience. Oh, and I have a fire to put out. I'm out. Take care, gentlemen. But yeah, that's an NPR thing for me.
You good, Bill?
Hi, Jason. I just wanted to know, Alex, when you start that, and I know you can't do a recipe remotely because it depends on the content, but do you start like 10 dB down or 20 dB down, or where do you normally set that duck?
I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it's about, I want to say it's between 10 and 15 dB under is where we had it. I don't remember exactly. It's been a couple of years since I've had to do that.
And obviously the content strength is going to make all the difference.
And the voice style and everything else.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah, when I do that in post, I it's typically somewhere between duck it by 12 to 18 dB, and I also put a high cut, so it's a little muffled as well, so it feels a bit more distant, not as present.
Oh, that's great. That's a great
tip.
I didn't think of that. That's good. Yeah, go ahead, photo Joseph.
Yeah, I was just going to add in that I have heard obviously content like that before, and I know for me personally, I can't stand that. So hearing both languages at once, I think especially if you know both languages, then it gets very hard for your brain to focus on one. I think if you're hearing something that's totally foreign, it's easier for your brain to tune that out. But if you know even a little bit of the other language, it's a lot harder. I would love to try and drive the conversation back to how to actually do the dual language stream, the dual audio track stream. And you talked about Apple AV Foundation with Akamai. Can you explain what you mean by that? Because I don't know how I would approach doing that. I haven't got a clue.
Yeah, I mean, here's the challenge with that is it only works on Apple products. So you can use, you need something that's going to play it out. You can pull it through Safari, but you can't use that player for Chrome and Firefox and everything else. And so that's the real challenge with that player is that it's not it's very full featured, but only if you're running iOS, tvOS, or Safari, not even Mac OS, but Safari. So that I know of, that's all we've used it for. And so because for what we've been doing, that was the primary output. It was all we needed.
But Safari on Windows would work.
Safari on Windows? Is Safari on Windows?
Isn't there a Safari on Windows?
No,
I thought
it's called Edge.
Not anymore.
No, I thought that Apple did a Safari.
There used to be a Safari on Windows.
Oh, maybe long ago. Yeah,
they stopped. I think they stopped.
Yeah. So it's not very cross-platform and it's not very user-friendly in that sense. I mean, if someone asked me to do it for a general audience right now, I admit that I would use some kind of badges and send them to the one that they want. The thing that you want to think about is if you want audience interaction, then you'd want to be able to somehow unify all those comments and questions, and so that's the thing that gets more tricky, and which is why we have a tool like Kana, because it does that. So you can have three different languages or two different languages, and everyone's chit-chatting. The only thing that would happen is if people the Spanish one might be tempted to, do all their comments in Spanish. So you'd have to figure out how you're going to, process that. One thing I will say, just outside of building those multiple streams, is to not underinvest in the microphones for the interpreters. We find that that's something it's a pet peeve of mine. Is that their interpretation machines oftentimes are very low quality, and you hear these big clicks on their insert, and you hear noise and all kinds of other stuff when they add it. And what we do is we tend to give them SM58s. Well, especially if we're in an open environment, not so in a big room. If we have a really quiet room for them, we can give them a variety of different mics and so on and so forth. But we give them a good mic that they can go up to. Now, a lot of interpreters don't like it because they don't have their little button they can push. They're kind of on. It's up to us to do that, but we can give them more proper ways to do that than using even the highest end mic interfaces. We haven't been very interpreter interfaces. We haven't been super excited. I think there's one called Iconics. I think is the one that we've used, which is the highest end one. I think it's $1,500 a unit or something, and we still weren't totally happy with the sound quality and the control. Go ahead, Stuart.
Search Safari for Windows. Top answer, Opera browser.
There you go.
Just one thought, with YouTube having previously had multi-camera, wouldn't it have been possible to feed the same vision to each camera and then separate audio?
No,
To
multi-camera.
match,
So we use multi-camera for multi-language a lot. In fact, because it was 6 inputs, it was perfect for us because we could do the UN6. And so the UN6 is the standardized 6, and I'll always forget one, but it's like English, French, Russian, Mandarin. Or they say Chinese, but it's really Mandarin, Arabic, and Spanish. So those are the UN6 that, and the big thing is for us, you use the 2 languages that you need, or you do the UN6. Once you go over the UN6, everybody wants to be included. Everyone's like, why did you skip my language? Why aren't you doing Swahili? And so so you have to be careful of going over the UN6 because it's there. So anyway, so don't underestimate or don't skimp on microphones, in my opinion. It's just something that it's a really low quality experience, and it really does improve the situation. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, like when you're doing the interpretation, the audio of the interpreter is as important as your main speaker, because they're speaking for them essentially.
And oftentimes it can be better because they're in a room where you can give them a good mic, and they don't have to be a lab, and there's not a bunch of speakers. There's no excuse for it not being better than the core audio. Go ahead, Joseph.
Okay, so let's assume that we go down the route of streaming 3 separate streams, but one of the challenges that then we get into is bandwidth for the video. Is there any kind of a service like a restream service where you can stream 1 channel of video, send multiple audio, and have it merge and distribute those out? So I'm only having to have the bandwidth to stream 1 video stream.
It's called AWS and an elemental link. So an elemental link will take 1 SDI signal with up to 8 audio channels. It's $1,000 for the link. You take 1 SDI signal, you pack up to 8 languages onto it, or 6 languages with stereo pair in the front end. Once it gets into the AWS cloud, you use Media Connect or Media Live, and in there you can set up multiple outputs. And in those multiple outputs, you can pick off which channels you're sending out to that stream. So inside of Media Live, and I'm going to build a Media Live. The problem is the only Media Live I have is connected to my company. So they're all, I can't show you, I can't open it up and show it to you, but I'm going to build a separate one that I can put some of these links on so I can show it to you guys. But basically what you do is you can put up to, you put up to 8 languages per link. And so if you have 16 languages, you use 2 links. And there's a couple different ways to do that. One is, obviously, if you have some kind of, you need something that's going to embed those multiple channels. The easiest is, and I don't remember who the brand is, it just came out. They have a Dante to SDI embedder, de-embedder, and it's like $1,500. But what it does is you just pass it through, and you can either embed channels or de-embed channels from that based on Dante, which is a really efficient way to do it. But there's lots of ways of embedding. Anything that'll embed the audio into the video, you can use. But then you embed those video. We've done it. The most popular way that we did it was with an AJA FS2 because we had a lot of control over delays and all kinds of other things that we want in mapping. But that Dante interface will work. You get a used Pix 240, it'll do it. You can insert those channels. So there's a bunch of different ways to pull those in and out. Anyway, so you put those you have an SDI signal with multiple channels. In your case, 4 channels of SDI would probably be enough. And 4 audio channels, because you'd have oftentimes a stereo pair for the main, for your whatever, and then you'd only need Spanish, right? Anyway, so you have those channels there once they get into the cloud, and that's a Zixi connection to the cloud. So that Zixi connection is going to be very robust, very flexible. You can set it in the link to be up to 20 megabits, but it will flex down if it has issues with your bandwidth. It'll seamlessly go down to 5 or 3 or 10 or whatever it needs. And if you want to limit it at 10 or 8, you can. But once it gets into Media Live, inside of Media Live, you can now say, I want to take that same signal, that device signal, and I want to send it out to Facebook and YouTube, but you can send it out to multiple Facebooks, multiple YouTubes, all those things. And in each one of those outputs, you can set which channel you're using to send out to that output. Test heavily, but specifically, I have done this specifically with English and Spanish, where I have a link going into Media Live. It was for a high school, whatever. I did it a high school thing because I wanted to test it. I just did it for free because I was just like, I don't know if this is going to work. Works great. So anyway, but you can remap all of your channels that way. So that's a way to, and then you have to think about, the only thing I would think about if I had 4 channels that I was inserting was building 2 full stereo mixes, for Spanish and English. So everybody gets even parity, so that you would get, it's a full show on both of them. And then you pick off the bottom pair or the top pair. But the link to AWS would be in my opinion, the easiest and least expensive way to do it. From there. And from there, you could theoretically build an AWS player. You could probably stand up some player that worked with it that would pick off those, that could get all those languages. I don't know how to do that right now, but I think that it would be a doable project. When's this event happening?
Well, they actually decided not to do live for the first one. It's December 5th.
Okay.
And we decided not to do this one live, which is great. So we have another quarter to figure out how to do it live before they want to do it again. This first one, we're just going to record. And
if you record that and you have those multiple languages, I'm happy to do a test with a link if you want. Like we just play it out. I mean, I've got the gear, so we could just play it out and put it on 2 different channels. And I'm always interested because I find multi-language to be a fascinating challenge. Of figuring out how to get those. But that's specifically, one of the solutions we're doing is that one video out or 2 videos out with 16 channels of audio is what we're working on in India. And so because bandwidth is a thing, and so how do we get all of those out without putting out 16 channels of video is the challenge. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Matt first.
Sorry, I'm slow on the mute. So up here in Montreal, we have to do a lot of English and French. So my whole AV career has been setting up translation booths at the back of rooms, and putting the booth guts, as we call them, inside with the horrible switches. You're absolutely right that change languages. They're just horrible. But now that we're getting into online. They want to see their slides in the right language as well, and they want it live translated with the right language slides. Also, a lot of times the presenters will repeat themselves in the other language. So as a viewer, you're hearing it in English translated to French, then you're hearing it in French translated to English. It's extremely frustrating for the viewers because they're like, I've heard this already. And it's an epidemic of this in up here anyway, where I have to listen to everything twice. It drives me nuts. I'm trying to get our presenters to not do that, but they're like, well, I have to greet everybody in their language, I have to say this special thing in their language. I'm like, do you really? Like, do they have to hear it twice?
Yeah.
So that's a struggle that we have. But I'd love to hear more about the multi audio track CDNs. And I asked that question. That was maybe the next question. I'm not sure, Bill.
It is in truth.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah.
Mickey. Well, before we jump on, Mickey, did you have one more thing to add?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, just for like in Matt's situation, I think it would be a matter of coordinating. Like, what are we going to have someone interpret to a different language, or are the presenters going to speak in 2 different languages? So, getting that locked in beforehand, before the before the show starts, would fix that problem. I think.
And by the way, Jeff Widgren in the chat posted a solid solution. Also, is that Zoom will let you do he's saying something slightly different. Zoom has a multi-language drop-down list inside the webinar. Yeah. So you can actually set this up where you have have an interpreter as another input into a Zoom. And then if someone's in Zoom, they can actually click on that and listen to it. And I know there's been that's a great, I'm glad that Jeff brought it up and reminded me of that. We've only used it a little bit with Spanish, but we've had other members of the office hours group that use that with many languages, where you pop a bunch of languages in there and they can So you can have a bunch of languages in there, and people just tap on the one they want to listen to, and it's a custom setup, but it's available in the Zoom webinar. So theoretically, you could run this, and then people could just select the language they want to listen to. And in that case, the interpreter can actually listen to it in Zoom and from anywhere and speak into their mic, and it'll go into that as a translation. I would test it. I've worked with Zooms that do it. I haven't actually had to implement the multi-language, but there's been a lot of ones that have been added. It used to be just the UN6 and a couple extras, and now there's lots and lots of languages that are available that have little flags that you can select. So that might be, in the short term, even before December 5th, you could probably pull that off, but you'd have to kind of commit to a Zoom section to make that work. But that would be that might be another way to do it, and that'd probably be the easiest way to do it as far as making it available there. So that's something else to think about. That's good. I'm glad that Jeff popped that up. I forgot all about it. Yeah, that's probably the easiest, fastest way to do it, to make that work.
So the first question, and this is Matt's question, and Matt, I think I've pronounced your last name wrong about a dozen times when you've asked things in the past, so I apologize in bulk. Can you give some examples of CDNs that have a multi-channel audio system that would allow more than one language on a single stream?
One thing I'll say is that for CDN, it's not really the CDN that does it. It's the protocol that you're using. So it's the player and the manifest, the interaction between that. So with HLS, which most of what you get delivered to you is using HLS, you have a bunch of segments, and those segments, some of the segments can be video. It can be, then you have audio. You can have multiple audio segments that are all named and going along with it. And so what happens is there's a little text document that just says where everything is. When the player gets that text document, that's the manifest. And for some reason, I always think of the manifest as this guy in his mid-60s who's been smoking his entire life. Yeah, what do you want? Yeah, I got here a 1080p. I got some English. I got some French. What do you need? Okay. I don't know why, but I always think of the manifest. It's like he's half sailor, half technician. Sitting there smoking a cigar, talking to you like, you want a 320? Why would you do a 320? All right, if you want a 320, I'll give you one. But if you need more, come back. I'll give you a 720. So. Anyway, so the manifest floats around, and the player is like, oh, I always think of the player as like this kind of timid fellow, like, oh, what do I do? Well, you can have whatever you want. Yeah, okay, I think I'll try a 1080. And so, are you sure you can handle it? I think I can do it. So the player is looking at the manifest of what's available, and then the player is looking for what's available and then deciding based on its bandwidth, based on what it has, what it's going to go grab from that manifest. The manifest gives it all the things that are possible. Here's all the stuff on the CDN that's going up. So it can be multiple languages and captions and all kinds of other things that are going up. It's a pretty ingenious structure. So all these streams are going to being made available. The manifest tells it. If you take it out of the manifest, the player can't see it. So the player is making most of those decisions. So it's not a function of the CDN. And the only reason I want to define that is it's not a function of the CDN. It's a function of what is being sent up to the CDN. The CDN just is moving packets, right? But then the player being able to do it. So what you really want to look for is players that can support. If you have a way to put HLS up there, then it's players that can support multi-language and multi, and I haven't had to deal with that because most of my stuff is either we use multiple streams or we've been using the Apple's AV Foundation, and so we haven't had to deal with it as much. But I'm now fascinated by the problem. So of course we'll be. JW Player is one that you might have those options, but we'll take a look at it. And I'm gonna try to bring someone on that's pretty smart about this stuff. We'll see if we can't see if she'll come on and hang out with us a little bit. Go ahead, Brian.
Did you just say JW Player? I
believe it's JW Player. I haven't had it.
Yeah, I was just looking at it, and it looks like it does. I haven't used it in a while, but it looks like it will support that.
So
live
that's a little more custom. Go ahead.
Livestream Studio is another one that says it does it, but
again, it's not the studio. It's I guess if Livestream on the other end will support multiple languages. So Livestream Studio going into Livestream
will ingest it. Yeah. I don't have a live stream studio, but I have a live stream account where I stream to. Do you know of a way of getting audio, multi-channel audio into a live stream without a live stream studio?
Right. A live stream without a live. Yeah, I don't know if that would work. It's probably. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. I'll look.
Yeah, let's look into it. Next question.
And moving on, Matt, is it cool? Cole, cool?
Yeah, cool. Like the weather.
Cool. Like thank you. I'm gonna make a note. Okay, Frank Haney, which I'm probably mispronouncing too. It's probably something else from Ottawa. Says multi-language. How do you deal with closed captions for multi-language events?
A little trickier. So again, this gets into where a manifest and the player. You're never going to get that guy out of your head now. Now they infected all of you with.
Welcome to Alex Lindsay's anthropomorphizing languages.
Yeah. So anyway, the captions are actually harder than multi-language because and it seems simple because it's just text, but the problem with multi-language captions is just how do you insert those into the system. And so you can get up to my knowledge, you can get up to 2 languages at a time using like an EEG. You can insert those into an SDI feed, but when we've done more than that, we've had to stack up EEGs to do more languages. And so that's been an issue. The other problem you'll find is that captioning in more than English and Spanish is really hard. The United States has a lot of requirements for broadcast to do captioning in English. So every broadcast has to be captioned. So English is relatively easy to find. Spanish is okay to find. French is okay to find. Once you drop off of English, Spanish, and French, it's a long drop. Of finding capable captioners, without a lot of pre-thought of getting them, making them available. And there's some languages that just don't caption very well, like Hindi, Mandarin, Japanese. Those are just hard because of the way that the language is structured. They don't really have a keyboard that allows them to do that in time. Now, one of the ways that they've gotten around that is what we call respeaking. So respeaking is another way to do it. And how respeaking works, and we won't go too much into captions, but respeaking is you listen to something and you say it out at almost the same time. And the difference is that person had whatever mic they were on stage, they have an environment, they might have broken English or not as good English. You have a Dragon software style thing that's trained to your voice in a quiet environment with a good mic. And all you're doing is respeaking what they said. And then the AI goes in and turns it into stuff. And so respeaking actually gives you a lot more flexibility in captioning. But it's a lot harder. And we'll do a whole nother thing on captioning. I'm going to give you a little taste of that, but we'll do another hour, maybe even next week on captioning. But it's multi-language captioning is still a pretty big challenge as far as inserting it. The easiest one is YouTube if you do the multi-streams, because YouTube has an HTTP input, so you don't have to embed it onto the 608, 708. You can just simply send a HTTP stream to each one of the YouTube events, and that's the easiest way to get captions in. But it doesn't mean that you can drop down and find them. Next question.
Yeah, I moved up Brody Hafner's because I think it's useful for everybody. Regarding proper terminology, translating refers to writing, interpreting refers to speaking. What is the proper term with reference to captions? Is it captioning or is that too broad?
Technically, captioning is captioning in that language, and it's a very specific term, and it's a technical term and a legal term of what captioning is. So normally what we tend to say is the proper term is usually subtitling. Is how we'd refer to it. But we'll jump into captions and subtitling in another hour. Next question.
Yeah. So Frank's actual question was multi-language. How do you deal with interpretation and the audio chain for multi-language events?
That all depends on anyone raise their hand if they want, but that all depends on whether everybody's local or people are remote. So if people are all local, as Matt pointed out, there's cute little booths that go in the back. They can set them all up for you. The way that it's traditionally done is they're punching into the old way to do it is they're punching into the actual stream that you have. You get that back and you put it out. That's the easiest way for an AV team to do it. The way we do it is we just get them as another feed, another stem per person. We give them their own microphone, and they come into our digital mixer, and then we have control over how that interacts with all the other audio and where we track it and everything else. And so that's what we prefer. In fact, one of the things that I've been looking at, I haven't had the opportunity to do yet, is use some of the shiny Studio Technologies Dante interfaces. So Dante Studio Technologies makes these announcer boxes that have a Dante interface and have an announcer button, and we've been thinking about moving to those because now they have a nice mic. They push the button when they want to talk. It's just a Ethernet back to us, so it's nice and clean. So that's been one of the things that I've been kind of circling as far as a test of that process. But then, as I said before, we're embedding these into multiple things into an SDI stream. Now, if you're doing it internationally or you're doing it having remotes, if you go back, I don't know how you'd find it in our archive. I think there's been complaints about finding things in the YouTube archive, but we did do a talk about how our team or team within our group worked with again His Holiness the Dalai Lama's team to build a remote system that basically they're listening. I don't know whether they're listening over Connect, but they were sending stuff back over Unity Connect back to a system. So they're speaking into it, and it comes back over Unity Connect back in, and then via Dante through that Mac Mini goes back into a QL1 and is part of the thing. And that is managing up to, I believe, 16 languages, and half of the interpreters are somewhere in Asia or somewhere in the world, but not. And the latency is almost negligible. We're talking 300 milliseconds, 400 milliseconds, so less than a half a second. So it's the human latency of how long it takes them to interpret it is longer than the digital latency. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, there's so many ways to get the transport of audio into your board, but essentially, like the real work happens in the mixer and the board with a multitude of buses and aux outs. Yeah,
I mean, the key is getting clean audio into a digital board. In my opinion, then there's all, and then having an embedder. So those are the big three are, you got to get clean audio into that digital board, and then you need something to embed it, and then you need something to be able to interpret that embedded signal into multiple streams. I mean, and that way you can kind of do a lot of those transports, on their own. That's the simplest way, in my opinion, to move it around. So, next question.
The next biggest vote getter is from James Babbitt in San Diego. Hi, Alex. For a mixer like a Dugan Audio Mix, is there a software version that works well?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Waves has the Dugan Auto Mixer and speech processor that works on their LV1 software mixer.
And is that a VST? Is it something you can put into something else?
At the moment, it only works with LV1 and also their what do they call it? Their studio rack, which works with other digital mixers. It doesn't work just as a VST on the AWS.
I don't know if there's a way to. It's an interesting problem. I don't know if there's a way to do that in post, like to just play it out, like have it analyze the tracks and auto duck based on.
Well, for auto ducking, I just use standard compressors with sidechain inputs.
Oh, right. But can you do all the side chains? If like 6 people talking, can you have 6 side chains that you would put in so they'd all interact with each other the way a Dugan would?
Yeah, I mean, like it's a more complex setup in terms of the routing, but it's definitely doable. It doesn't have the more advanced speech algorithm that Dugan has. Right. Because it's just looking at the levels, and you set your attack and decay, attack and release on the compressor.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely doable. I mean, that's how that's what we do. Like for really fast mixes, wherein we have to duck music underneath dialogue for say something like a reality show. That's how we get it done.
Got it. Next question.
And it's from Mickey himself, multi-language. Is there a standard in terms of the channel order of the different languages being delivered into the feed?
Not that I know of. It's a good question. I don't know of a, I mean, there could be. And what unfortunately, we had a member that was showing up for office hours from The Hague that had to deal with lots of languages, and he may be more able to talk through that. But I don't know if there's a standard. Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, if you beam it up to the satellites, like, is there something that, say, broadcasters would know? Okay, 5 and 6 will always be Mandarin, or 5 and 6 will,
Really, what we do when we do the satellite uplink is, number one, is we put up what we think everyone's going to use, because there's a huge number of satellite downlinks that can't do anything with the signal. they don't know how to do, like, they get the first 2 channels, and if you're lucky, what you hope is they don't sum them together. So when we're really being careful, we will have a separate feed for everyone of just saying general use feed, and then the people that we talk to, we give them another uplink that is got all the extra channels and everything else, so not to confuse the less technical downlinks that might happen. So oftentimes, if we send first 2 channels, and if we're lucky, and then all the other stuff. So if people don't know it's coming, they don't look for it. In that vein, when we send out, there's a stack of information that you send out for a satellite downlink to when you publish it to all the broadcasters. It's the frequencies and the position of the satellite, which satellite it is, and how it's formatted, and all the different bits and pieces of what you need to know to pull it down. In that, usually we have the channel layout. So this is so in there's a channel layout. I don't know of any standardization, like they would automatically go to those, but I know that we always lay out what's in the channels, in that piece. And that also might have a bliss code, for if it's encrypted, and it's, there's a bunch of other, bits and pieces to it. And so, but you have to always remember that as many as half of the people, if you're doing a general uplink, as many as half of them will not be able to do anything. Like, so whatever you send in channel 1 and 2 and in video, and we have to worry about that. Like, we don't have to worry about it anymore, but 4 years ago, we were still worrying about, can they do HD, downlink? And then there's also, can they convert, like if you're going international, can they convert 30 to 25? Do they have the tools internally to do that? Or should we do that? So usually what we want to do is as much work on our end as we possibly can to make it easier for them. And that, that's what you always want to do in almost everything. You do all the technical work and make everything else as dumb as possible, dumb pipe as possible for people, because it just reduces the wetware problem. There's hardware, there's software, and then there's the wetware between your ears. And so if you ever hear us refer to, we got to solve that with wetware, that means we got to train somebody or educate people to do something. Next question.
And we're down to our last one that's currently in the queue, and this is from Johnny Estias in Manila. I've used a service called clevercast.com for a multilingual live stream. Has anybody ever used it? And he's got a link there.
Clevercast? No, I have not used it. But now we now knew a new possible solution for this. This is kind of an ongoing. I think it's a good subject. It's an ongoing challenge, of doing it. Now, Joseph, did you have any other comments, questions, things that you're thinking about that help solve some of your challenges?
Yeah, it definitely helps. I think getting away from, at least for now, trying to do a single video stream with multiple tracks that's just not reachable enough until YouTube embeds that. I think the problem we'd have is discovery. So it probably is best to just worry about having 3 different feeds. Maybe we'll put the original language one on YouTube with a link on there that says, if you want different languages, go here. We go to their website and have multiple streams embedded there. And the AWS solution seems like the easiest way to go for bandwidth. So I think we have a pretty good solution here. And like I said, we've got a quarter now to figure this out before we have to do it for real.
I do think if I had to do it, if I want to do it live, you could totally do it with Zoom. I'm glad.
And that is a great option. I like that. What is the maximum number of guests you can have in a Zoom webinar?
10,000.
Oh, okay. So it's enough.
Yeah. And
one hopes.
There's people within this group that have licenses that could cover 500 or 1,000, at high resolution, and this could be theoretically kind of a fun little test case for us. So if it's something you decided to do for something like the 5th. It's not out of the question that you could get some technical support to make that happen.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely not going to do it for the 5th, but that's good to know. And it's worth setting up a test either way. So yeah, the Zoom solution is a very, very cool one. And then you could still, from Zoom, have it push one of those languages out to YouTube, right?
I don't know how that works.
Well, just because you can from Zoom, like we're doing right here, right? We can use Zoom to push to YouTube.
I just don't know if it would do multiple languages. It'd probably do the English.
Well, so do the native, like do the original one, the one that's
Mm-hmm.
mixed language. Yeah. It's
still
super interesting.
gobsmacked.
Okay, Zoom's a really interesting solution.
Yeah.
I'm gobsmacked that Zoom wasn't even on 90% of the world's radar 8 months ago, and suddenly now it is one of the lingua franca terms of communication on the globe. That's an amazing shift. I mean, just amazing.
Right place at the right time. Well thought out. I mean, you know, part of it is the newer architecture. I mean, a lot of the older ones are historical, you know, I mean, or have a lot of legacy code, and they have less. You know, I think if I'm correct, I believe that the founders came out of WebEx, so it's not like they didn't know what they didn't like, you know, and so, but I think that when they first came out, we looked at them and it wasn't super stable, you know, and it was just kind of like, I don't know why people would stream with this and everything else, and so I think I didn't jump on it immediately, but what I will say, watching all the other interfaces, you know, or all the other ones, is that a lot of them are either terminally broken. Like, I don't think that they have any way of fixing it. You know, I think that GoToMeeting and WebEx, I don't think there's any real solution that they're ever going to come out of it. They benefit from and Chime, horrible flat platform. Those three, I think. I think they can just throw all the code away and start writing again. Like, I don't think that, I think anything they try to do to fix it is just going to, and then I would say that BlueJeans is kind of on the precipice of that, where I don't know how they could really be. The one thing that's cool about BlueJeans is the Dolby stuff, where it puts people in different spaces, which is kind of cool, but that's easy to, you know, anybody can get that from Dolby. And so, but I feel like their approach is so broken that I don't know if they could. BlueJeans also has a really cool thing of presenting videos. You can upload a video. It takes a long time, so you have to really think about it. But it'll play out locally on it, or play out in some special way on everyone. So if you really want to show a high quality video, BlueJeans has a good solution for that. But that's like one feature round for Zoom, and they could do it. Fundamentally, what I'm seeing mostly is, like, especially with Meet and Teams, which I think are probably the closest to Zoom, but I still think way back there. I barely see Zoom on a racetrack. I just see them flailing. You know, like, to me, like, all the stuff they're adding and everything else just makes it harder or weirder. You know, they're trying to be different or trying to do whatever. And, like, you know, a lot of their weird virtual stuff, I don't see how that is, you know, interesting. So
aren't they just pointed kind of at the corporate space, and they're trying to do a top down and bigger corporations who are comfortable with Microsoft servers?
Zoom just keeps on making better decisions. You know, it's just a decision process. It's who's at top and how much control they have, and Zoom keeps on making great decisions, you know, about what they're going to do next. And I think that's going to be a hard thing to get over, is when a company is doing most of the right things. It's not that I think that Zoom is perfect. There's a lot of things I complain about, but they're making better decisions on a daily basis than the other teams, and I think that's what gives them the advantage. Stuart, then Matt.
Just on volunteering and, like, test events. I don't know if Joseph was here the other day, but there was a pretty damn good response for
Clean show.
Volunteers. I'm an Aussie.
No,
this is
still international standards, not Aussie standards, international standards.
But
right,
one request: if there is a multi-language version, can we have one channel in Klingon and one channel in Belter?
Okay, Matt.
Klingon translators are a little hard to come by.
Yeah.
Please live speak.
No. There's plenty. Trust me, there's plenty.
Oh, we have to try that.
I have
That would be
Valerian,
fun.
man. You have to add that to the list.
The hilarity of that.
I want Dothraki.
You know, the thought process is doing a Star Trek based Zoom with a bunch of proper interpreters for different languages from the Star Trek universe, or the same thing with Lord of the Rings, would be hilarious.
Like, you could Ferengi.
Oh my gosh! All right.
I should point out, Belter is from The Expanse.
Right. Matt.
Yeah, I'm still coming across executives that, you know, will not use Zoom because of security concerns. And I mean, they put those to bed a long time ago. But I'm still coming across them that biggest don't want to know about it, you know.
Well, we've done, all I can say is that I've done Zooms with world leaders, you know, people that are right below world leaders, military, highly secure folks that have to have closed sessions all over the world with no issues. And these are people that would be targets of those types of things. It's not that it's absolutely, we've seen a couple incursions, not on ours, but a couple other ones. But generally what we find is that our clients are actually choosing to be less secure than more secure, in that process. So we want to tighten everything up. We want to require you to be registered to Zoom. We want to give you a password, a waiting room. Like if you add all those things onto it, it is as secure as just about anything other than a closed network. As a public, piece, it is as secure or more secure than everything else. But you have to turn the tools on, to do it. Like, any Zoom bombs that you're seeing at this point are people not. And Zoom's been quietly just forcing everybody to turn some of those on. Like now we have to have a password or a waiting room, which we tend to use both. Not here. I keep it pretty open here, but we have other security called mic checks. so those are. But I think that it's as secure or more secure than almost anything else out there now. But I know that people have that was a hard thing for them at the beginning because there was so many civilians using it so as easy. I just want to turn it on and make it work, and they didn't have any technical wherewithal to understand it. But it's again, lots of things that I'd love to see added to Zoom. I would give it a 4 out of 10, but I would give Meet a 1 out of 10. So, and everything else was below that. So, Michael?
Yeah, I do a lot of work with the military and also several suppliers for the military. And because of that, they require us to use the FIPS encryption system, which is only, to my knowledge, available through WebEx natively. Now, is there something in Zoom that we're going to be able to utilize like that?
I don't know, and I don't know if it's a huge target for them, to be able to get to that granularity. That might be something that it just slows down the effectiveness of everything else to have WebEx in the middle of everything. The thing is a virus.
Well, that's just it. But we're having to use.
That's how people stay business. That's how people stay in business. Is they have some unique, weird thing that they do.
WebEx has the FIPS system. If you email or call them and say, "Look, I'm going to need it for my next 3 meetings," they will enable it for you.
Right.
And it automatically sends a key to the receivers, and they're the only ones that can get it. So we've been able to do a lot of highly secure streams with them. But
I think that
it's such a better platform to use than WebEx.
I just find that unless you're in a truly closed environment from a security perspective, to specific rooms with specific controls, with no electronics in the room, which I've been in, so where you leave all the electronics at check-in, and you go into those rooms, and those rooms are tied together, and there's that's secure, or as secure as you're going to get it. But anything less than that, I feel like people can grab, can get the information. There's 1,000 ways to record it. It's not truly secure to do that. Next question.
Fabled skiff. Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne just has a question for Laura Seal, who's in the chat, and says she missed the Resolve 17 rollout. Does someone have a link to the replay?
It should be on YouTube. I think the rollout's on YouTube. Not our commentary, but we didn't record it. But the link itself should be on replay. And I'll think of it. I'm Eddie Scott. I don't know if I can do that guy again. I just came out of me. The manifest guy. I have to. I don't know where that came from. So it was.
You need to animate that guy and do the voice. You have to do it.
And it is on the YouTube recording.
It has come out a couple times when I've described manifest before. Just because it's to me, it's just I can picture the guy. I don't really do when I used to do voices. I don't have a way to do the voices. I just channel whatever the picture of that person is in through it. So I don't really have a way to do that. Anyway, but
we're gonna miss him from now on.
Well, I've been wanting to do like a little thing with that guy and the player and everything else as a description of how HLS works, and I just haven't. I had to do how HLS works for a talk a while ago, and so I have this whole idea of how to do it, and I just haven't gotten around to it. We'll see. All right. Anyway, we're gonna let everybody go. We're running a little early, but I think that was good. Joseph, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Hopefully today's discussion was useful, and
it was great.
but thanks to everybody. And tomorrow we'll talk about kits. We're going to talk about remote kits and what we use at different levels and what's important and what we think about when we're sending them out. So we'll dig into that. Hopefully people will find that useful. And until then, for everybody, have a great day, great evening, great morning, wherever you're at. And